Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Well, we left off yesterday just as an owl came into the kitchen. And that is exactly where we're going to start today. I'm not sure how far we're going to go because we start chapter 3 here in just a few pages. So maybe we'll go a little bit into chapter 3 today. I do have to make the videos a little bit shorter than I've been making them because YouTube's been having a hard time getting those uploaded. 20 minutes is apparently a bit too long, but 10 minutes appeared to be the sweet spot. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Uncle Vernon might still have been able to make his deal if it hadn't been for the owl. Aunt Petunia was just handing round a box of after dinner mints when a huge barn owl swooped through the dining room window, dropped a letter on Mrs. Mason's head, and swooped out again. Mrs. Mason screamed like a banshee and ran from the house, shouting about lunatics. Mr. Mason stayed just long enough to tell the Dursleys that his wife was mortally afraid of birds of all shapes and sizes, and to ask whether this was their idea of a joke. Harry stood in the kitchen, clutching the mop for support as Uncle Vernon advanced on him, a demonic glint in his tiny eyes. "Read it," he hissed evilly, brandishing the letter the owl had delivered. "Go on, read it." Harry took it. It did not contain birthday greetings. "Dear Mr. Potter, we have received intelligence that a hover charm was used at your place of residence this evening at 12 minutes past 9. As you know, underage wizards are not permitted to perform spells outside of school, and further spell work on your part may lead to expulsion from said school. Decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, 1875, paragraph C. We would also ask you to remember that any magical activity which risks notice by members of the non-magical community, muggles, is a serious offense, and under Section 13 of the International Confederation of Warlocks Statute of Secrecy. Enjoy your holidays. Yours sincerely, Mafalda Hopkirk. Improper use of magic office, Ministry of Magic." Harry looked up from the letter and gulped. "You didn't tell us you weren't supposed to use magic outside school," said Uncle Vernon, a mad gleam dancing in his eyes. "Forgot to mention it. Slipped your mind, dare I say." He was bearing down on Harry like a great bulldog, all his teeth bared. "Well, I've got news for you, boy. I'm locking you up. You're never going back to that school. Never. And if you try to magic yourself out, they'll expel you." And laughing like a maniac, he dragged Harry back upstairs. Uncle Vernon was as bad as his word. The following morning, he paid a man to fit bars on Harry's window. He himself fitted the cat flap in the bedroom door so that small amounts of food could be pushed inside 3 times a day. They let Harry out to use the bathroom every morning and every evening. Otherwise, he was locked in his room around the clock. 3 days later, the Dursleys were showing no sign of relenting, and Harry couldn't see any way out of the situation. He lay on his bed watching the sun sinking behind the bars on the window and wondered miserably what was going to happen to him. What was the good of magicking himself out of this room if Hogwarts would expel him for doing it? Yet, life at Privet Drive had reached an all-time low. Now the Dursleys knew they weren't going to wake up as fruit bats. He had lost his only weapon. Dobby might have saved Harry from the horrible happenings at Hogwarts, but the way things were going, he'd probably starve to death anyways. That cat flap rattled and Aunt Petunia's hand appeared, pushing a bowl of tinned soup into the room. Harry, whose insides were aching with hunger, jumped off of his bed and seized it. The soup was stone cold, but he drank half of it in just one gulp. Then he crossed the room to Hedwig's cage and tipped the soggy vegetables at the bottom of the bowl into her empty food tray. She ruffled her feathers and gave him a look of deep disgust. "It's no good turning your beak up at it. That's all we've got," said Harry grimly. He put the empty bowl back on the floor next to the cat flap and lay back down on the bed, somehow even hungrier than he had been before the soup. Supposing he was still alive in another 4 weeks, what would happen if he didn't turn up at Hogwarts? Would someone be sent to see why he hadn't come back? Would they be able to make the Dursleys let him go? The room was growing dark. Exhausted, stomach rumbling, mind spinning over the same unanswerable questions, Harry fell into an uneasy sleep. He dreamed that he was on a show in a zoo, with a card reading "Underage Wizard" attached to his cage. People goggled through the bars at him as he lay, starving at weak on a bed of straw. He saw Dobby's face in the crowd and shouted out, asking for help, but Dobby called, "Harry Potter's safe there, sir," and vanished. Then the Dursleys appeared, and Dudley rattled the bars of the cage, laughing at him. "Stop it," Harry muttered as the rattling pounded in his sore head. "Leave me alone. Cut it out. I'm trying to sleep." He opened his eyes. Moonlight was shining through the bars on the window, and someone was goggling through the bars at him. A freckle-faced, red-haired, long-nosed someone. Ron Weasley was outside Harry's window. I think we have time to keep going. So, we're going to start chapter 3, The Burrow. I'm excited. I was just actually emailing with one of the parents this morning about how this is my first time reading this book. I've never read any of the Harry Potter books before until the first illustrated version that we read in class over the last few months. So I haven't been going ahead. I haven't been sneaking through and finding out what happens. I'm just as excited as you are. All right, The Burrow. "Ron!" breathed Harry, creeping to the window and pushing it up so they could talk through the bars. "Ron! How did you—" Harry's mouth fell open as the full impact of what he was seeing finally hit him. Ron was leaning out the back window of an old turquoise car, which was parked in mid-air. Grinning at Harry from the front seats were Fred and George, Ron's elder twin brothers. "You all right, Harry?" "What's been going on?" said Ron. "Why haven't you been answering my letters? I've asked you to stay about 12 times, and then Dad came home and said you'd gotten an official warning for using magic in front of Muggles." "It wasn't me, and how did they know?" "He works for the Ministry," said Ron. "You know we're not supposed to do spells outside school." "Bit rich coming from you," said Harry, staring at the floating car. "Oh, this doesn't count," said Ron. "We're only borrowing this. It's Dad's. We didn't enchant it. But doing magic in front of those Muggles you live with? I told you I didn't." "But it'll take too long to explain it to you now. Look, can you explain to them at Hogwarts that the Dursleys have locked me up and they won't let me come back? And obviously I can't magic myself out because the Ministry will think that's the second spell I've done in 3 days, so—" "Stop gibbering," said Ron. "We've come to take you home with us." "But you can't magic me out either." "We don't need to," said Ron, jerking his head towards the front seats and grinning. "You forget who I've got with me." "Tie that round the bars," said Fred, throwing the end of the rope to Harry. "If the Dursleys wake up, I'm dead," said Harry, as he tied the rope tightly around a bar and Fred revved up the car. "Don't worry," said Fred, "and stand back." Harry moved back into the shadows next to Hedwig, who seemed to have realized how important this was and kept still and silent. The car revved louder and louder, and suddenly, with a crunching noise, the bars were pulled clean out of the window as Fred drove straight up into the air. Harry ran back to the window to see the bars dangling a few feet above the ground. Panting, Ron hoisted them up into the car. Harry listened anxiously, but there was no sound from the Dursleys' bedroom. When the bars were safely in the back seat with Ron, Fred reversed as close as possible to Harry's window. "Get in," Ron said. "But all my Hogwarts stuff, my wand, my broomstick." "Where is it?" "It's locked in the cupboard under the stairs, and I can't get out of this room." "No problem," said George from the front passenger seat. "Out of the way, Harry." Fred and George climbed carefully through the window and into Harry's room. "You had to hand it to them, though," thought Harry, as George took out an ordinary hairpin from his pocket and started to pick the lock himself. "A lot of wizards think it's a waste of time knowing this sort of muggle trick," said Fred, "but we feel that their skill's worth learning, even if they are a bit slow." There was a small click, and the door swung open. "So, we'll get your trunk, you grab anything you need from your room, and hand it out to Ron," whispered George. "Watch out for the bottom stair. It creaks," Harry whispered back, as the twins disappeared into the dark landing. Harry dashed around his room, collecting his things together and passing them out of the window to Ron. Then he went to help Fred and George heave his trunk up the stairs. Harry heard Uncle Vernon cough. At last, panting, they reached the landing, then carried the trunk through to Harry's room to the open window. Fred climbed back into the car to pull with Ron, and Harry and George pushed from the bedroom side. Inch by inch, the trunk slid through the window. Uncle Vernon coughed again. "A bit more," panted Fred, who was pulling from the inside the car. "One good push." Harry and George threw their shoulders against the trunk, and it slid out of the window and into the back seat of the car. "Okay, let's go," George whispered. But as Harry climbed onto the window, there came a sudden, loud screech from behind him, followed immediately by the thunder of Uncle Vernon's voice. "That ruddy owl!" "I've forgotten Hedwig." Harry tore back across the room as the landing light clicked on. He snatched up Hedwig's case, dashed to the window, and passed it out to Ron. He was scrambling back onto the chest of drawers when Uncle Vernon hammered on the unlocked door, and it crashed open. For a split second, Uncle Vernon stood framed in the doorway. Then he let out a bellow like an angry bull and dived at Harry, grabbing him by the ankle. Ron, Fred, and George seized Harry's arms and pulled as hard as they could. "Petunia!" roared Uncle Vernon. "He's getting away! He's getting away!" What a good place to stop for the day. Wow, this is a good book, y'all. I hope that you've enjoyed the first part of Chapter 3. And we'll have to continue with it tomorrow. Alrighty, I hope you have a beautiful Wednesday. I've been told today that I can pop into the school and get some of the books for our literacy curriculum. So I can pick up some picture books for opinion writing and persuasive writing, and for our analyzing, what were we doing in literacy? Making inferences. So I'm going to bring those and maybe come up with a plan to start posting some of that in the next week or so. Alrighty, y'all. Have a great day, and that's all I got for you. Miss you.